Few moments in modern royal history have stunned the world quite like this one at the Vatican. The day Kate Middleton, the Princess of Wales, extended her hand to greet Pope Leo XIV during a formal ceremony, only to have it declined, would be replayed across news feeds and social media for years to come. The entire hall froze for a few precious seconds. Eyes went wide with disbelief. Whispers evaporated into tense silence, and every camera in the room captured the moment in perfect, piercing clarity. But the real shock came in what the Pope did next, something nobody, not even his most trusted aides, could have predicted. This wasn't just a polite nod or a graceful ceremonial dismissal. No, it was a deliberate, loaded action. Powerful, symbolic, and possibly a veiled warning aimed squarely at the British royal family. What unfolded in those few minutes would leave the world questioning centuries-old protocols and alliances. Could this encounter conceal long-hidden tensions between the Crown and the Catholic Church? And what went through Kate Middleton's mind as she was publicly refused before the eyes of a global audience? All will be revealed. The handshake that never happened was just the beginning. Barely 5 days after Pope Leo XIV first appeared on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, the world was still reeling from the unprecedented news: an American pope. For Vatican insiders and seasoned watchers, it felt almost fictional. Yet here he stood, calmly defying centuries of entrenched ceremonial tradition. Gone were the heavy embroidered robes, gold-threaded vestments, and jewel-studded rings. In their place, a simple black cassock, a man moving without an entourage, dining at a modest wooden table, sleeping on a plain cot, without tapestries, without marble, without the trappings of power. The only crown he acknowledged that morning was a crown of thorns, worn humbly in silent devotion. In the dim hush of the Sistine Chapel, sunlight streamed through ancient stained glass windows, painting ribbons of colour across the stone floors. Pope Leo knelt alone, whispering a passage from the Gospel of John. Behind him, a Vatican aide approached cautiously, lowering his head. "Your Holiness," he said gently, "Catherine, Princess of Wales, has requested an audience. She is en route to Rome. No official delegation, no diplomatic channels." The Pope slowly opened his eyes and rose, calm yet resolute. He turned toward the altar. "Prepare the receiving room," he said quietly. "But this meeting will not follow the usual protocol." When the aide asked about the press, the Pope shook his head. "No need. The world will hear soon enough." Meanwhile, high above the Mediterranean, Kate Middleton reviewed her notes aboard a sleek private aircraft, composed, poised, camera-ready, always polished, always precise. She was far more than a royal figure. She was a global brand. Her team hovered, making sure every word of her prepared address was flawless. This wasn't merely a greeting. It was a carefully curated statement, a declaration of identity, regal, polished, warm, and unmistakably modern. "This moment," she said, "is about connecting faith with grace, tradition with today. I want that image on every front page." Her stylist double-checked the outfit: soft ivory, simple pearls, each piece chosen to convey quiet authority. An assistant, anxious, leaned in. "Your Royal Highness, this Pope, he's different. He breaks rules. He's unpredictable." Kate smiled, steady, unwavering. "I'm not here to impress him," she said calmly. "I'm here as one symbol to another." As her plane descended into Rome, whispers rippled through Vatican corridors. "Princess of Wales seeks private audience. No advance notice. First meeting with the American pontiff." Journalists scrambled. Vatican guards adjusted ceremonial posts. Cameras were positioned. The ornate hall, usually lavishly arranged for kings and heads of state, had been stripped down. No velvet drapes, no gilded thrones. Pope Leo sat quietly in the centre, red zeta over his simple cassock, hands folded, eyes calm. No rings, no scepter, just a man of faith, waiting. "The blessings that the Lord continues to pour upon all of us," he murmured softly. Then the doors opened. Kate entered, radiant, poised, each step careful yet fluid. The room seemed to freeze around her. Cameras clicked. Flashbulbs popped. Aides were silent. She approached the Pope with the practiced charm of someone who had met countless world leaders. Smiling, she extended her hand. "Your Holiness," she said warmly, On behalf of the British people, it is an honour to greet you, from one servant of the public to another. But Pope Leo did not meet her gaze. His hands remained gently folded in his lap. The silence was deafening. Kate's hand hovered inches from his. Seconds stretched. The warmth in her eyes flickered into confusion. Slowly, gracefully, she lowered her hand. "I see," she whispered, almost to herself. Without a word, the Pope walked past her, not to embrace, not to apologize, but to a small wooden table at the side. On it, a simple silver basin, a clay pitcher of water, and a folded white towel. He rolled up his sleeves, his movements deliberate, precise. What happened next would redefine the very meaning of diplomacy and sacred ritual. The room was silent, too silent for the Vatican. Not a whisper, not a shuffle, just the sound of Pope Leo XIV standing before the basin, calm, steady. The attention that had been on the handshake now shifted to something far deeper. Across from him stood Catherine, Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, the epitome of grace under pressure, the master of carefully crafted appearances, unwavering poise. Yet here, she faced a moment with no script, no precedent, no palace-approved briefing. This was no longer a ceremonial meet and greet. It was something entirely different. "Your Royal Highness," Pope Leo said, voice calm but firm. "I did not come here to exchange gestures for the cameras." He gestured toward the basin, his eyes locking on hers. "I came to offer something deeper." The tension in the room thickened. Kate's staff exchanged nervous glances. Vatican officials leaned forward. The press, stunned into stillness, could barely breathe. One journalist dropped a pen. The sharp crack echoed like a gunshot across the marble floors. Kate, so often confident and poised, hesitated, not from fear, but genuine uncertainty. She had come to honour the Pope with a gesture of unity, but he had flipped the script entirely. "If you are willing," Leo continued, gesturing to the water, "I invite you to join me in a ritual older than any title either of us bears." The silver basin shimmered in the warm light. Simple, ancient, sacred. Kate stepped forward, instinctive, then paused. "This isn't what I expected," she said softly, voice quieter than usual. The Pope smiled, gentle yet unwavering. "It isn't what any of us expected," he said. "That is precisely why it matters. No longer a photo opportunity or a diplomatic formality. The moment had become sacred." Pope Leo lifted his gaze to her, motioning gently across the basin. "Leadership," he said, glancing briefly at her poised hand, "is not measured by the strength of our grip, but by the humility of our touch." For a moment, Kate froze. Years of mastering public appearances, gliding through chaos without a misstep, could not prepare her for this. It was no longer about control, image, or etiquette. It was about surrender, humility, and authenticity. A pause, a breath, a choice, step forward or retreat. She inhaled slowly and moved closer. The press gasped, cameras locked in, advisors held their breath. She stopped directly opposite the Holy Father, her expression a mixture of calm and raw curiosity. Pope Leo lifted the clay pitcher. The soft sound of pouring water echoed like a whispered prayer. "Jesus washed the feet of his disciples," he said gently, not because he had to, but because no leader stands above those they serve. He dipped his hands into the water, letting the weight of centuries press down on a moment neither could have foreseen. Kate reached for the towel with elegant care, fully immersed in the ritual that had no script, no precedent, only meaning and significance beyond the eyes of the world. Kate dried the Pope's wet hands with deliberate care, each movement precise, respectful, never performative. For the first time, the cameras caught her not as a duchess or future queen, but as a person fully present, willing to pause, to engage, to exist in a moment of raw humanity. When she finished, Pope Leo washed her hands in return, the very hands that had held her children, steadied microphones, and carried the weight of royal duty. For over a decade, those hands had been symbols of poise and protocol. Now, they rested in his with quiet consent. Kate did not resist. She allowed it. No applause erupted, no whispers circulated, no hashtags trended, only watching. Everyone knew something had shifted, though they could not yet name it. Then Pope Leo turned toward the press. "We may speak," he said, his voice calm, but carrying undeniable authority. He glanced briefly at an aide. Let the press re-enter fully. Kate looked down at her hands. They were dry, but transformed, marked not by water, but by the gravity of the moment. Her posture softened slightly. Still proud, still regal, but subtly altered, she now stood beside the Pope, no longer a distant guest, but something closer, something part of a larger ritual the world had not anticipated. Cameras rolled. The global audience watched, still trying to understand what had just occurred. And then came the question on everyone's mind. Why had the Pope chosen this moment, this ritual, and why Kate herself? The press sensed the shift immediately. There was no buzz of gossip, no race to tweet, only a profound hush. Journalists, who were usually in constant motion, paused. This was no ordinary press moment. Something deeper, personal, almost sacred, was unfolding before their eyes. A French reporter stepped forward first, voice steady but curious. "Your Holiness," he began, "you refused the Princess of Wales's handshake. Was that a sign of rejection?" Pope Leo XIV responded without hesitation. "It was not a sign of anything at all," he said firmly. "It was a sign of intention. In our world, gestures are often performed for applause, not for meaning. I did not refuse to shame her. I declined to invite her into something deeper." The room absorbed the words like a shockwave. Kate, standing beside him, her gaze reflective, seemed to have shed a layer of armor. Less defiance now, more awareness. A Reuters journalist leaned forward, tentatively. "Were you offended, Princess?" "I was surprised," she admitted honestly, "but not offended. I expected protocol. Instead, I received perspective." Another reporter, voice cutting through the silence, pressed, "What does this stage, this symbolism, signify for the Pope?" Leo's eyes softened slightly, as if the question missed the point. "Had we planned this," he said, "it would have been meaningless. This is not about performance. It is real, lived, and shared." Kate did not merely react. She responded with poise, a gentle nod, a quiet acknowledgement. There is a difference between being caught off guard and being invited into a moment that challenges your assumptions. What the Pope offered was unsettling, yes, but undeniably true. In politics, such honesty is rare. The firebrand image of Kate, the polished, controlled duchess of public perception, seemed to vanish. She and the Pope were no longer distant symbols. They were participants in something unspoken but deeply felt. "Your Holiness," a voice finally broke from the back, hesitant. "Some say you embarrassed her. Was this about power rather than humility?" "If humility feels like dominance," the Pope replied softly, "then perhaps we have misunderstood humility itself." It was no longer a press conference. It was a space where centuries of ritual, faith, and personal conviction converged. Journalists leaned in, watching history in motion. Some were writing notes, others were simply witnessing. Kate absorbed every second. This wasn't a story about politics, power, or religion. It was about grace under scrutiny, about recognizing meaning in the subtle, the understated. No one understands that better than she does. Kate Middleton, Princess of Wales, has never commanded attention through grand speeches or orchestrated drama. She moves quietly, deliberately, gracefully, but always with force where it matters. Her gestures are soft, firm, intentional, warm, but never overexposed. Like Pope Leo, she values presence over performance. At royal events, she often lets silence speak, letting moments carry weight where words fail. Where others might rise defensively, she leans into discomfort, demonstrating that true power lies not in proving, but in embodying. A journalist finally asked, "Why water, Your Holiness? Why choose this ritual for such a symbolic moment?" "Because water purifies," he said gently. "It humbles and unites. It is creation's first sign in every sacred text. If we cannot stand at the same basin, how can we lead from the same place?" Kate, having navigated the tension between tradition and modernity her entire life, understood perfectly. Motherhood, public scrutiny, palace politics, all layered atop a duty she never sought, yet always carried with unwavering commitment. She recognized the weight and quiet power of symbols. Glancing down at her hands, she admitted quietly, "I did not expect to be humbled today. I do not always agree with everything the Church stands for, But my grandfather used to say, if your pride drowns out your conscience, you are not leading. You are merely selling an image. Would Kate Middleton say this aloud? Perhaps not. But in her actions, in the way she touches the hospital patients, steers away from drama, protects her family and navigates the public eye, her message is clear. Leadership is not always loud. It is consistent, quiet, deliberate. A soft voice from the press broke through. "Princess, would you do it again?" "Yes," she said immediately without hesitation. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. The Pope nodded. "True transformation," he said, "begins where comfort ends." That statement rippled through social media like wildfire. The story changed in an instant. Not a tale of rejection, but a revelation of profound personal truth. Journalists struggled to recalibrate. What had they witnessed? What did it reveal about leadership, humility, and the courage to pause? A BBC reporter ventured carefully. "Your Holiness, some argue that your actions today blur the lines between religion and politics, between belief and performance. Could this set a dangerous precedent?" Pope Leo folded his hands, gaze serene. "Faith is not performance," he said. "Service is not theatre. Today was not a step towards spectacle, but away from it." His eyes met Kate's. She now stood not as a symbol of royalty alone, but as a figure of depth, courage, and presence. Another journalist asked, "Princess Catherine, did it feel like a test?" "It wasn't about power," Kate said softly, clearly. "Yes, it was a test, but not of rank or role. It was a test of presence. In that moment, I chose to show up, not show off." A quiet murmur passed through the room. The press, usually relentless, leaned in. This was no longer a standard conference. It was a turning point, a collision of faith, tradition, and personal conviction, reshaping one another in real time. "Your Holiness," another voice asked, "is this approach part of a new Vatican diplomacy, personal, unpredictable, emotional?" Leo answered without hesitation. "This isn't diplomacy, it is discipleship. The Church does not trade in pageantry. It stands for truth. People are weary of empty gestures." A reporter from South America leaned forward. "And what does it mean that Princess Catherine accepted your gesture?" The Pope's gaze softened on Kate. "It means transformation is possible. Even those raised in palaces can choose humility. True faith does not care for crowns or titles. It only asks, will you kneel? For a breathless moment, pens fell. The world watched in awe. Kate's voice then rose, steady, clear, but not rehearsed. "All my life," she said, "I've been told strength means perfection. But today, I realized something different. Strength without surrender is just fear wrapped in grace." She turned her gaze toward the cameras, speaking not as a duchess, not as a princess, not as a future queen, but as a woman fully present in a moment that transcended titles, protocol, and expectation. Shedding the weight of protocol for the sake of honesty, Kate Middleton and Pope Leo XIV shared a moment few could ever imagine. If anyone watching remembers one thing, let it be this: elegance does not equal leadership, and confidence does not always mean conviction. Kate admitted softly, almost to herself, "I'm still learning. I hope I never stop." The Pope placed his hand over his heart. "Real leaders," he said quietly, "do not lead from a distance. They serve side by side, shoulder to shoulder, humbly, intentionally, and with presence." Outside the chapel and the halls of the Apostolic Palace, the world had quieted, crowds lingered, yet the usual cacophony of speculation and gossip was replaced by a hushed reverence. People watched, but not for scandal. They watched for something different, a story rooted in meaning, in substance, in humanity. The press conference ended not with the frenzy of flashing cameras or shouting voices, but with a profound respect that few had ever witnessed. And yet, the private exchange between Kate and Pope Leo was just beginning. An aide moved to escort them from the hall, but instead of taking separate exits, the Pope gestured toward a narrow side corridor. No cameras, no microphones, no flashbulbs, only silence. Kate hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her calm composure. Then, slowly, she followed him. The corridor led to a small private chapel, dimly lit, almost austere. A single candle flickered beneath a simple wooden cross. No gold, no marble, no pageantry, Just quiet, empty space, and the weight of what had just transpired. Kate whispered, "I wasn't ready for this." "No one ever is," the Pope replied gently, kneeling at the front pew. Kate lingered awkwardly behind, unsure how to move, unsure how to feel. "I thought I'd be in control," she admitted quietly. "You still are," he said, voice soft but piercing. "But ask yourself, what kind of control do you really want sitting here beside me?" Kate reflected on her journey. For years, she had spoken about leadership, about changing things, giving voice to the unheard, striving to make a difference. Yet in that quiet chapel, it became clear she had never spoken of changing herself. She had tried to shape the world outside, control perception, steer public opinion, all while keeping her inner self rigid, untouched. Here, in the stillness, facing the crucifix, she understood. True strength begins within. The Pope smiled knowingly. Maybe today is just the beginning. A soft knock interrupted, but he waved it away. From his sleeve, he drew out a small, hand-carved olive wood rosary. "This was given to me by a woman in Palestine who lost 3 sons in conflict," he explained. "She had almost nothing left, and yet she gave even that, her faith. I place it in your hands not as a token, but as a reminder of what you already know inside." Kate closed her fingers around it, feeling the weight, both physical and symbolic. "I don't even know how to pray," she admitted, a quiet laugh escaping her lips. "You just did," he replied softly. She laughed again, caught between wonder, humility, and disbelief. "You surprise me, Pope Leo," she said, almost breathless. "And you surprise me," he answered gently. "Most people run from the unexpected. You stepped into it." He looked at her steadily, almost challenging her. "Tell me, why did you stay after I refused your handshake? Why didn't you walk away?" Kate considered his question for a long moment. Then, with calm conviction, she said, "It didn't feel like rejection. It was a challenge. I didn't want to fail it." The Pope nodded slowly, approvingly. "And you did not fail." Outside, the world buzzed with speculation. Inside, the chapel was a sanctuary of stillness. 2 leaders, stripped of titles, removed from protocol, were simply present, learning humility together. The impact of their shared silence was profound, a lesson in respect and introspection that no camera could ever fully capture. When they finally emerged, the atmosphere had changed. Reporters instinctively lowered their voices, as though intruding would break the sacred spell. Pope Leo and Kate walked side by side, without entourage, without formal announcements. Simply presence, a quiet declaration of shared understanding. A reporter ventured hesitantly, "Will you release a statement?" Kate paused. She looked at the Pope, then back at the gathered press. "No," she said. "For once, words aren't enough." The Pope raised his hand, acknowledging the crowd silently. Then, almost unexpectedly, he extended his hand toward Kate. She accepted. The crowd erupted, not with chaos or excitement, but with awe. This handshake was not about victory or hierarchy. It was a handshake of recognition, of equality, of shared humanity. Within the apostolic palace, a cardinal murmured that such a gesture was unprecedented. Leo smiled, as did Kate, and in that quiet recognition, the world witnessed a rare moment of grace. Though the encounter lasted only minutes, its resonance was extraordinary. Titles, ceremonies, and protocol all faded into insignificance. A refused handshake, a shared ritual, and a private moment in a chapel carried the weight of history, diplomacy, faith, and personal revelation. Every gesture, every pause, was deliberate, meaningful, and profound. And beneath that silence lies a much deeper truth, one that cannot be captured by headlines or commentary. If you are curious, if you want to explore the untold stories hidden behind the velvet curtains of royal palaces, the quiet corridors of faith, and the moments that shape history itself, then consider joining us. Hit subscribe, leave a comment if this moment moved you, and be part of this journey. We will continue to uncover the secrets, the gestures, and the untold truths that rarely reach the public eye. Thank you for watching. Your presence here matters because moments like this remind us that leadership is not about titles, ceremony, or spectacle. It is about courage, humility, and being present. We'll see you in the next video as we explore more untold stories of grace, power, and humanity behind the walls of royalty and faith.